She lived a quiet life no one noticed, until something unexpected arrived at her door. Despite the whispers and mockery, she held on with quiet strength and love. Years later, what happened in front of the whole town left everyone speechless. Stay tuned because you are about to watch a beautiful story and find out what happened next. Hello, family. Welcome to Tales Haven. Kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Margaret Hayes had lived a quiet life for as long as she could remember. Every morning, she woke up before the sun, packed her small lunch of boiled eggs and crackers, and walked across the narrow path to Westbrook Elementary School, where she worked as a janitor. Her clothes were always neat, though faded from years of washing. Her shoes were worn, and her back hurt most days, but she never complained. At 52, Margaret had accepted her life for what it was, simple and lonely. She had no husband. He passed away when she was just 34. She had no children either, though she always wished for them. Her tiny wooden house sat behind the school, just close enough to hear the children playing at recess, but far enough to feel forgotten. It was early March, and the cold morning air slipped through the cracks in her front door. Margaret reached for her coat, buttoned it up, and was just about to head outside when she heard something strange.
A sound.
It was faint, almost like a kitten, but then it came again, louder and clearer. It was a baby's cry. Margaret froze. She walked to her door slowly, heart pounding, unsure of what she'd find. As she opened the door, the early morning wind brushed past her, and her eyes fell to something that made her legs weak. A large laundry basket sat on her front step. Inside were two tiny newborn babies, wrapped in nothing but an old towel. They were crying softly, faces red from the cold. One was a boy, the other a girl. Margaret gasped and dropped to her knees. Her hands trembled as she reached into the basket, lifting the towel carefully. "Oh, my lord," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "You poor little angels." She scooped them up one by one and brought them inside, wrapping them in her only warm blanket. The room was barely heated, but she turned the small electric heater toward them and grabbed the last bottle of warm milk she had in the fridge. With the babies bundled in her arms, she called 911. "There are babies on my doorstep, yes. 2 of them. They've been left here. Please send help." While waiting, she sat on the old couch, rocking the twins gently and humming a lullaby she hadn't sung in years. The ambulance came within minutes. Paramedics checked the babies and confirmed they were stable, cold, but alive. The officer on duty asked questions, but there were no answers. No note. No witnesses. Nothing but a basket and 2 crying newborns. They wanted to take the babies to the hospital for further care, and Margaret agreed. But she insisted on riding along. At the hospital, Margaret watched from a hallway as nurses cleaned and checked the babies. A soft knock came at her side. A woman in a gray coat and black glasses approached her. She was from Child Services. "Miss Hayes," she said. "Thank you for calling. We'll start the process of placing them into foster care as soon as possible." But Margaret didn't move. She looked through the glass at the twins, sleeping peacefully now. I don't want them to go," she said suddenly. "I want to keep them." The woman blinked in surprise. "You do?" "I know I'm just a janitor," Margaret continued, her voice shaking, "and I don't have much. But those babies were left at my door for a reason. Maybe they're meant to be mine." The social worker hesitated. "There will be an investigation. We need to be sure you can provide for them. You live alone, correct?" Margaret nodded. "I work hard. I can take on extra cleaning shifts. I may be poor, but I won't let them go unloved." There was a long silence before the woman finally said, "We'll place them in your temporary care for now. But there will be home visits and inspections. Are you ready for that?" Margaret didn't even blink.
Yes.
"I'm ready." That night, she brought the babies home. She named the boy Noah and the girl Naomi. She borrowed a crib from the local church and bought baby bottles with the last money she had in her old cookie tin. Neighbors whispered. Some stared. But Margaret didn't care. She held those babies in her arms and whispered, "I don't know where you came from. I don't know why someone left you, but I promise I won't leave you. And in that tiny house, lit only by a dim lamp and a heart full of love, a new chapter quietly began. The house was quiet, except for the soft breathing of the twins. Margaret sat on the floor between their cribs, her eyes tired but full of peace. She had no crib mattress, so she folded thick towels and used soft blankets as bedding. The heater hummed in the corner, doing its best to warm the cold night air. Her savings were gone. Every penny had gone into baby formula, diapers, and a few tiny clothes she found at the second-hand store. But she wasn't afraid. She had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. The next morning, Margaret was already up before dawn. She cooked oatmeal in a small pot while keeping one eye on the twins, who were still asleep. She packed her mop, gloves, and a small plastic lunchbox with cold toast. Then she called the principal of Westbrook Elementary to request a late start. "I have babies now," she said calmly. The silence on the other end was thick. "Babies?" the principal asked, confused. "Miss Hayes, what?" "They were left on my doorstep," she explained. "I'm raising them now." There was another pause, followed by an awkward, "Well, we need you by noon. The school won't clean itself." Margaret hung up, changed the twins, and wrapped them in warm towels before calling an old neighbor, a retired woman named Clara who sometimes helped watch children in emergencies. "I can't pay you yet," Margaret told her honestly. Clara, kind-hearted but worried, said, "I'll help for now." "But are you sure about this, Margaret? Raising 2 children alone?" Margaret nodded. "They need someone. And I need them too." From that day on, her life changed completely. She worked all afternoon and into the evening. During lunch breaks, she ran back to the house to check on the twins. Some nights, she stayed up till 2 a.m. holding Naomi when she cried with teething pain, then got up again at 5 a.m. to boil water for baby bottles. Her hands grew rough. Her legs swelled. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. Still, she smiled. Every time Noah giggled or Naomi held her finger, she felt alive. But outside her little home, the town began to talk. "Did you hear about the janitor? She's raising abandoned babies. With what money? She should have left them to foster care." The mocking wasn't always loud, but it was everywhere. At the grocery store, a woman loudly whispered, "You see her coat? Looks like it came from the garbage. And now she's raising kids." At church, a man said, "Some people want to play hero, but love doesn't fill stomachs." Margaret heard them. She always did. But she kept her head down. Not in shame, but in quiet strength. One evening, as she pushed her mop through the hallway of the school, she overheard 2 teachers near the staff room. "It's sweet, what she's doing," one said. "Sweet," the other laughed. "It's stupid. Those kids don't stand a chance. They'll end up cleaning this place too." Margaret paused, her hands gripping the mop tighter. She didn't say a word. That night, she went home, kissed both twins on the forehead, and whispered, "People will say what they want, but I see something in you they don't." The twins grew quickly. By the time they turned 1, Naomi was already trying to talk and Noah loved pulling books off the shelf. Margaret filled their days with learning, counting spoons, singing letters, pointing out colors in the sky. She turned their world into a small classroom of love. She made their toys from cardboard boxes and paper towel rolls. She made Play-Doh from flour and salt. Their laughter echoed in the tiny house like a symphony of hope. But things got harder too. The heater broke during a harsh winter. Margaret got sick one week and couldn't afford medicine. She pushed through anyway, coughing into her sleeve while warming baby bottles with boiled water. And still, people kept whispering. But she didn't live for their approval. She lived for 2 tiny smiles. And every single night, after rocking Noah and Naomi to sleep, she knelt beside their makeshift crib and whispered the same prayer. "God, help me raise them right. Let them become everything I was never allowed to be. Let them make this town eat its words."
She didn't know it then.
But those quiet prayers were about to grow into something the whole town would never forget. By the time Naomi and Noah turned 6, they had become the heartbeat of Margaret's small home. Noah loved numbers. He could count faster than most of the older kids at school. Margaret would catch him arranging beans on the floor, solving little math puzzles by himself. Naomi, on the other hand, loved stories. She would sit quietly with books far above her age level, whispering the words as her eyes moved across each line. Then she would write her own tales on scraps of brown paper from grocery bags. Margaret noticed their gifts early. She didn't have money for fancy tutors, but she gave them everything she could: time, attention, and a deep belief that they were capable of anything. Still, the outside world didn't believe in them. At school, the other children whispered behind their backs, "Those are the janitor's kids. Look at Naomi's shoes. They're falling apart. Noah brings the same lunch every day." The bullying wasn't always loud, but it was cruel. One day, Noah came home with tears in his eyes. "Someone said I'm nothing because I don't have a dad." Margaret sat with him on the floor and gently took his hands. "You may not have a father," she said, "but you have a heart full of purpose. That's something money can't buy." The next day, Naomi returned from school holding her broken pencil box, a gift from Margaret, now cracked in two. "They said I should go pick trash with you instead of coming to class," she whispered. Margaret hugged her tightly. "I pick up trash," she said softly, "so you don't have to. One day, they'll be reading your stories in places their minds can't even reach." Despite the pain, the twins didn't give up. And Margaret didn't stop believing. She made learning fun. She created spelling games with bottle caps, counting games with buttons, and reading challenges with old library books. On weekends, they sat together on the porch while she read aloud from borrowed novels, letting their minds travel beyond their little town. And slowly, their light began to shine through the cracks. In 4th grade, Naomi wrote a poem titled "The Woman with Tired Hands." She read it aloud in class, her voice soft but steady. It was about Margaret. The teacher, who once barely noticed her, had tears in her eyes by the end. Later that week, the principal called Margaret into her office. Margaret walked in nervously, still in her janitor's uniform, hands stained with floor wax. The principal stood up, smiling. "I just wanted to say, your children are special." Naomi's poem was incredible. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, she returned home and placed Naomi's poem on the wall. She didn't need a frame. She just used tape. But to her, it was a masterpiece. Meanwhile, Noah was doing his own magic. He won a regional math competition at just 10 years old. When his name was called, many people in the audience gasped. "The janitor's son?" someone said aloud. But Margaret only smiled. At home, she sat on her little couch, watching her children do homework with joy in their hearts and purpose in their eyes. The house still had cracks in the wall. The heater still coughed now and then. But the warmth inside had never been stronger. Still, not everyone celebrated their success. One afternoon, Margaret overheard a group of women talking near the grocery store entrance. "Of course they're doing well. She probably gets help from the school. I bet it's all charity. No way those kids got smart on their own." Margaret walked past them without saying a word, because she knew the truth. She had raised them with discipline, love, and faith. Not with money, not with pity, but with her heart. And she could feel it. The winds were changing. Her children weren't just surviving. They were beginning to soar. Years passed. Noah and Naomi were no longer the small children running through the broken fence gate with scraped knees and secondhand shoes. They were now 18, taller, wiser, and carrying the quiet strength Margaret had poured into them since the day they arrived in that basket. Noah had become a star in the science club. He tutored younger students, aced every exam, and earned a full scholarship to one of the top medical programs in the country. Naomi, too, had grown into a remarkable young woman. She had written dozens of short stories, won multiple writing awards, and was accepted into a top university for creative writing and literature. A publishing company had even shown interest in her poetry. Margaret had never flown on a plane. She didn't know how to type, or even how to use a smartphone properly. But she had raised 2 scholars, 2 world changers. On the twins' graduation day, the school auditorium was packed. Margaret sat in the back row in a borrowed dress and her polished but old shoes. Her hands trembled as she held the graduation programs close to her chest. The announcer spoke loudly into the microphone. For the valedictorian award in science and leadership, Noah Hayes. People stood and clapped. A few gasped. Margaret pressed her hands to her lips as she watched her son walk across the stage in a dark blue robe, smiling proudly. And for excellence in literature and creative writing, Naomi Hayes. Another round of applause. More gasps. That night, when they got home, Margaret placed their certificates carefully inside a shoebox wrapped in floral paper, the same box that once held baby clothes. "Everything I've prayed for, it's happening," she whispered to herself. But what Margaret didn't know was that Naomi and Noah had been planning something behind her back. 2 years later, the sun was bright over Maple Hill as the town prepared for its annual community ceremony. Margaret had no idea what the event was truly about. All she knew was that Naomi had sent her a new dress, a beautiful emerald green one, with a note that read, "Wear this, Mama. You'll understand soon."
She didn't argue.
She combed her gray hair, wiped dust from her best shoes, and took the bus downtown. When she arrived, people turned to look. She had always been the woman people ignored, the janitor who walked with her head down, who cleaned their children's messes quietly and disappeared before morning bell. But not today. A crowd had gathered in front of the community hall. Cameras were everywhere. Music played softly. Balloons floated in the air. Margaret blinked in confusion. What is all this? Then she saw them. Naomi and Noah, standing at the front of the stage, both dressed in elegant suits, microphones in their hands. The crowd grew quiet as Noah began to speak. "There's someone here who never asked for thanks, who never expected recognition, but who gave her entire life to raise 2 abandoned babies no one wanted." Naomi continued, her voice breaking. "She is the reason we are who we are. She cleaned floors when no one was watching, fed us when she hadn't eaten, and never let us believe we were anything less than destined for greatness." Margaret's eyes widened. Noah pointed at her. "Mom, this is for you." Behind them, a huge banner was pulled down, revealing an announcement. "The Margaret Hayes Foundation for Abandoned Children now open." Gasps echoed. Naomi stepped forward. "We're launching a home for abandoned babies and struggling mothers in your name. Fully funded, fully staffed. Just like you gave us a home, we're going to give homes to others." Margaret covered her mouth. Her knees shook. That's when Noah took her hand and led her to the stage. "Also," he said softly, "there's one more surprise." He handed her a small white envelope. Inside, the deed to a brand new house on the hill, built with her favorite colors, flowers, and porch swing. Fully paid. Fully hers. Margaret could barely stand. The crowd began to cheer. Some of the same people who had once whispered behind her back were now standing with tears in their eyes. The same town that once mocked her was now clapping for her. The days after the ceremony felt like a dream. Margaret walked through her new house in silence the first night. The floors didn't creak. The walls weren't cracked. The heater worked without rattling. There was even a kitchen island with flowers, Naomi's favorite. She stood by the window, watching the stars outside. "I never asked for this," she whispered. "But thank you, God." The next morning, she received dozens of letters from strangers, neighbors, and even teachers who once looked down on her. One card read, "I used to laugh behind your back. I'm sorry. You raised more than children. You raised hope." Another letter came from a single mother in the next town. "Your story saved me. I was about to give up until I heard what you did with so little. Now I believe I can do it too." But Margaret didn't seek attention. She spent her days visiting the Margaret Hayes Foundation, where volunteers cared for babies, offered parenting classes to struggling mothers, and handed out small scholarships for education. Every time she walked in, children ran up and hugged her, calling her Grandma Hayes. Naomi published her first book titled The Woman on Birch Street. It became a national bestseller. Inside, the dedication read, "For the woman who found us in a basket and gave us a world." Noah, now a young doctor, came home every weekend. He took Margaret for checkups, cooked her favorite soup, and sat beside her while watching old movies. They didn't talk about the past often, but it lived in their eyes, in every quiet smile, in every silent thank you when Naomi rested her head on her mother's shoulder, or when Noah covered her with a blanket as she slept on the couch. The town of Maple Hill changed too. They renamed the street behind the school to Hayes Way. And every year, on the same date the twins were found, the school held a special assembly called the Day of Love, telling Margaret's story to remind children that greatness has nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with love. One quiet evening, as the wind rustled through the trees and the house filled with laughter from Naomi's visiting publisher and Noah's colleagues, Margaret sat on her porch swing. She looked at the stars above, the same stars she used to cry under, pray under, suffer under. Now, they felt different. She whispered, "You were worth it, Noah. You were worth it, Naomi. Every pain, every night, every whisper behind my back. I'd do it all over again." And in that peaceful moment, as Naomi gently placed a blanket around her shoulders, Margaret smiled. She had no fortune, no titles, but she had something greater than both. She had lived a life that proved love could raise leaders, that sacrifice could turn into legacy, that one poor janitor could change the world. That brings us to the end of this video. If you find this story worth watching, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Your support and engagement encourage me to post more videos. Thanks for watching.